Your next reading is understanding cash flow statements, and these are the contents or the specific LOSs within this reading. So we will do all of these one by one briefly, and of course in a way that will help you understand every content of the LOS. The first LOS says compare cash flows from operating, investing and financing activities and classify cash flow items as relating to one of those three categories, given a description of these items as well. Cash flow statement is split into three categories of cash flows: cash flow from operations, cash flow from investments or investing activities, and cash flow from financing. What exactly are the cash flows related to operations, investments and financing? Let us see these one by one, because the LOS specifically requires us to know what types of cash flows are in these three categories. So first discussing is the same LOS, LOS 1, cash flow from operations or cash flow from operating activities. These are the cash flows that are primarily from the business central and ongoing operations, the money received from customers to whom you have sold goods or services, any interest received on deposits on bonds, any dividend received on the equity investment, any sale of trading securities. There is a specific reading related to assets. We'll discuss trading securities there. Sale of trading securities results in an inflow. Any purchase of trading securities, it will be an outflow. Payment to employees, it relates to your operations. It's an outflow, operating outflow. Payment to your suppliers from whom you purchase goods or from whom you take services, it's an operating outflow. Interest paid, it is considered as an operating outflow, and taxes paid are also considered as an operating outflow. Remember, primarily when the information we are studying and the context is silent, whether it is GAAP or IFRS, you should follow GAAP, because CFA is an American certification. So wherever now interest paid and taxes paid, it might be treated differently in IFRS, but since the context is silent, so we must assume that we should follow GAAP. So interest paid, taxes paid are considered as operating outflows. Now the second category of cash flows is cash flows from investing activities. The word suggests cash inflows on sale of fixed assets, also called the long-lived assets, property, plant, equipment, vehicles, etc. So sale of fixed assets will result in inflow, and acquisition of fixed assets will result in an outflow. Now why are they not operating cash flows? Because they are not business central ongoing operations. Buying a long-lived asset and selling a long-lived asset, this is not our primary business. Yes, if you are a car manufacturer, yes, then in that case the cars, they do not represent your long-lived assets. That's your goods that you sell, right? So sale of fixed assets, long-lived assets, it's an inflow. Acquisition is an outflow. If you purchase a bond, it's an outflow. If you make an equity investment, you purchase some shares, it's an outflow, investing outflow. And when you sell such bonds, it's an inflow, sale of debt. And when you sell such shares, it's an equity investment, it's an inflow. Remember, these trading securities could be bonds, they could be equities, it could be preferred stock. Since these securities were designated as trading securities at the date of acquisition, so such trading securities, when bought or sold, they are treated as an operating outflow. Other equities, debts and equities, they are treated as a part of investing activities. Sale of debt, equity, acquisition of debt and equity. During the course of business operation, a business may lend money to others. It is not an operating outflow, because this is not our job to lend money unless we are a bank or a financial institution. So loan made to others, it's an investing outflow, and when this loan is returned to us, the principal received from the loan, when it is received, it's an inflow. This is, remember, its principal. Interest received on loan made to others, it will come as a part of your operating inflow. The third category of cash flows is cash flows from financing activities, written as CFF. When we issue bonds to raise money, when we issue shares to raise money, principal amounts of debt issued, share issued, they are inflows. Preferred stock, common stock, bonds, they are all is financing inflows. We issue bonds, issue shares, the money received against these instruments is considered as a financing inflow. Principal paid on debt or leases, this relates to financing. So principal paid on debt and leases, it's a financing outflow. Payment to reacquire stock, sometime company purchases its own stock. Such stocks are called treasury stock. So payment made to buy your own stock is considered as an financing outflow. And dividends paid to shareholders, since the context is silent, it is GAAP. Dividend payments to shareholders, it is considered as a financing outflow under the US GAAP. We'll discuss this comparative analysis. So these are the three categories of cash: cash flows from operations, cash flow from investing activities, and cash flow from financing activities. Your next LOS is describe how non-cash investing and financing activities are reported. Meet such investing and financing activities that do not involve any cash inflow and outflow. Now, what kind of transaction would they be when there is no cash inflow and outflow? Here we go. When a debt is converted to equity, convertible bonds, your liabilities has changed, your equity has changed. Yes, there is a change in liability and equity, but since there is no cash flow involved, we cannot report this in the body of the cash flow. This is called non-cash transaction. It's a non-cash financing transaction. Debt has been converted into equity. Assets obtained by assuming liabilities. You issued bonds as a consideration to acquire a long-lived asset like a property. So assets obtained by assuming liabilities or entering into lease agreements, these are non-cash transactions. Assets, liabilities composition is changing, but no cash is coming in, no cash is going out. Debt is being converted to equity. No cash is changed. There is no impact of cash. Capital assets received as gifts. There is no cash involved. You debit asset, credit could be given to reserve. So there is no cash involved. Capital assets received as gifts. Your assets are changing, but it does not involve any cash outflow for acquisition of the asset. Exchange of non-cash assets, and these are the transaction, specific transaction. They cannot be shown within the body of the cash flow statement. These items cannot be incorporated into the body of the statement. So where do we need to disclose them? They are disclosed in a separate section this way. Summary of non-cash investing and financing activities. We, during the period, converted 500,000 bonds payable into 2 million shares of $1 each. So this transaction does not involve any cash. So it has to be reported. So it cannot be reported within the cash flow statement. So it will be reported in the notes to cash flow statement. Summary of non-cash investing and financing activities. So this was your second LOS. Third says, contrast cash flow statements prepared under the International Financial Reporting Standard and the US GAAP. Now these are the summarized differences. How do we report different types of cash flows under the US GAAP and under IFRS? Interest received was considered as an operating inflow in the very first learning outcome statement. Interest received is considered as an operating inflow. Dividend received is considered as an operating inflow. GAAP, when the context is silent, you just get the information. How to treat them? GAAP supersedes IFRS. That's how we treat it in professional certification when there's a conflict between IFRS and GAAP, unless and until it is explicitly given. So interest received, it is considered as an operating inflow, but under IFRS, we can treat it either as an operating inflow or as an investing inflow. Why? Because interest is received on bonds, and bonds acquisition is an investing outflow. Any interest received is an investing inflow under IFRS. Dividend received, it is considered as an operating inflow under the US GAAP, but under IFRS it could either be treated as operating or investing. Why investing? Because you acquire equity investment by paying money. It's an investment outflow. Resultantly, any dividend received on those investments is or can be treated as investing inflow. Interest paid. Under the US GAAP, it is considered as an operating outflow, but under IFRS, it could either be considered as a financing. Why? Because interest is paid on debt, on bonds, on loans, and that is financing. So under IFRS, you could either treat it as a financing outflow, as an operating outflow. Dividend paid. Now this is a marked difference between the US GAAP and IFRS. Dividend paid is considered as a financing outflow under the US GAAP, explicitly asked in many questions in your EOC as well as the Kaplan edition, the questions of which I have just shared in the groups. So financing, remember, dividends paid under the US GAAP considered as a financing outflow, but under IFRS you have the option to show as a financing or operating. Income taxes paid as an operating outflow. Under IFRS it could be primarily treated as an operating outflow unless you can specifically allocate this tax either as an investment or a financing outflow. Okay, like for example, you had made money, some investment in equities, and certain taxes to be paid on those equity investments on the dividend income. This tax specifically is paid on the income related to your investing activities, so it could be shown as an investing outflow. Taxes paid on such dividends is considered as an investing outflow. So that is the possibility under IFRS, whereas in US GAAP, taxes paid are reported as a part of operating cash flow. Now next LOS, distinguish between the direct and indirect method of presenting cash flows from operating activities and describe arguments in favor of each method. You just have to distinguish. How do we draw up cash flow under direct and indirect? That we'll discuss in a separate LOS. First, we just learn to distinguish between which one is direct or which one is indirect. Remember, cash flow statement is divided into three categories: cash flow from operating activities, cash flow from investing activities, and cash flow from financing activities. Cash flow from investing and financing, they are exactly the same whether you're using the direct method or indirect method. It is just the difference between the cash flow from operating activities. Cash flow from operating activities under direct method is calculated differently, and under indirect method it is calculated differently. These two are the same. These two are the same. Now what is the difference basically? This is the direct method. Direct method simply takes gross cash receipts, money received from our customers. Sale of trading security, it is considered as an operating inflow. Interest earned is considered as an operating inflow. Dividends on equity investment under the US GAAP, when the context is silent, it's GAAP. And other operating cash receipts, these are gross cash receipts from operations, listed one by one. Cash disbursement for acquisition of inventory, of course, payment to your accounts payable. Purchase of trading securities, salaries and wages paid, interest paid, taxes paid, other operating cash payments. Deducting all these operating inflows from, deducting these all payments from the inflows, you get the cash flow provided by operating activities. This is called the direct method. You have gross cash receipts and payments from your operations, and you get cash flow from operating activities or cash, net cash provided by operating activities. There is an indirect method as well. We are not yet discussing why certain item is added or deducted. We'll discuss in a separate LOS. In indirect method, that's a little kida from one way to another. It's not a straightforward way. We start from net income. We make certain adjustments for working capital and non-cash transactions. And then we also deduct certain transactions. We start from net income and make some adjustments, and at the end, net cash provided by operating activities under the indirect method should be exactly the same that we draw using the direct method. It has to be exactly the same. Direct method operating cash flows and indirect method operating cash flows, they should be the same. It's just that it's a little kida way, it's little indirect way to calculate, but this is the direct way where we take the gross cash receipts and gross cash payments and we get the net cash provided by operating activities. And this one takes an alternative route. How to do it, we'll discuss in a separate learning outcome statement. Here you just need to distinguish between the direct and indirect. This is direct, starting directly from the gross cash in and out, and this is indirect, starting from the accrual based net income. Now we have distinguished between these two. We know the distinction between direct and indirect. Next, it's a little debate on why indirect and why direct. A comparative analysis. Direct method is preferred under the US GAAP as well as IFRS. IS 7 is specific standard related to the cash flow statements. GAAP and IFRS, they prefer direct method. But over the last 25 years of my professional accountancy, specifically I have worked in IFRS based regimes, I haven't ever come across a cash flow statement prepared under the direct method. Now you might ask, why, if the direct method is preferred under IFRS and US GAAP, why you will always see an indirect method? These are the three reasons. It's less complex. You simply start from the net income and you make some adjustment and there you go. You get cash flow from operating activities. It is widely used. I will say, as far as I have worked, 100% used. Everywhere I've seen this method being applied. I haven't worked for any American company, but in American company, even you have used the indirect method, you will have, if you have used direct method, you will have to provide the reconciliation. We'll discuss this point later. It's a little complex point. So as far as you're working within the IFRS based organization, you will find the indirect method being used. But under the US GAAP, direct is preferred. But if you use direct method, you will have to provide a reconciliation, and I will explain what that is. So indirect method is less complex. It is widely used, gives in the net results. Direct method takes the cash flow approach. It takes in the gross cash receipts, gross cash payments. It shows each category of cash separately. Cash received from customer, paid to supplier, paid to employees, this and that. Each category of cash flow shown separately. It gives more information than the indirect method. That's why it is preferred by FASB and IASB, that is IFRS and US GAAP based regimes. The problem is, under the FASB, if you have an indirect method is allowed, it is perfectly valid. But under the US GAAP, under FASB, if you have selected to prepare your cash flows using indirect method, you simply prepare a reconciliation between net income and cash flow from operating activities. That's the indirect method. That's what exactly do in an IFRS IS 7. But if you opted for direct method, you will have to provide a reconciliation between your net income and cash flow from operating activities, which is indirect method. A reconciliation between your net income and cash flow from operating activities, this is indirect method. This is indirect method. So in the US GAAP, if you decide to follow the direct method, you take the gross cash receipts, gross cash payments, still you will have to prepare a reconciliation which is indirect method. In other words, if you choose to apply direct method, you have to use both of these. In other words, the reconciliation between net income and cash flow from operating activity is a must. It's in indirect method, it is just as it is. But if you use direct method, you will prepare your operating cash flow through direct method. You will also prepare this reconciliation. That is the reason, gentlemen, you will see indirect method being in IFRS based organizations we use indirect method. Direct method is time taking. It apparently looks small. Look at the cash flow from operating. Looks little item, but these items will have to be searched for. You have to go to your sales ledger control account for the period, for the year, for the quarter to see how much cash has been paid to the customers or has been received from our customers. sale of trading securities, these items will have to be searched for. But in indirect method, you just need a trial balance and a balance sheet, and you just take these numbers from the trial balance and balance sheet, and there you go. But in direct method, you have to drill deeper. You have to find information in a much finer way. That's why we conveniently avoid this method. So gentlemen, that's the difference. Next reading says, describe how the cash flow statement is linked to the income statement and the balance sheet. That's your next LOS. The statement of cash flow classifies cash receipts and disbursement into three categories: operating, investing, and financing. How are they linked to income statement and balance sheet? That's the specific LOS. When you say operating activities, it means the cash flows from your operations. Statement of operations is also called your income statement. It means operating activities cash flows primarily come from income statement. Cash received from customers, revenue. Expenses paid, rent, insurance, property taxes, advertisement, salaries, all these are income statement items. So operating activities cash flows primarily come from income statement. There are certain adjustments as well from the balance sheet, but primary source of operating activities is income statement. Investing cash flows. Investing cash flows involve long-lived assets, investments in bonds, and investment in equity. So where do we find these? We find these in a long-lived assets section of the balance sheet. Investment securities and non-current assets. Acquisition of non-current assets, disposal of non-current assets, acquisition of investments, disposal of investments. All these relate to your investing activities. Financing cash flows. Financing activity involve issuance of bonds, issuance of shares, redemption of bonds, redemption of redeemable preferred stock. All this come from equity side, non-current liabilities and equity. So these are the specific sources from which we draw our operating, investing, and financing cash flows. That's your next learning outcome statement. And next, now this is what we will deliberate more in detail. What is to be added? Why? What is to be deducted? Why? We will spend a good deal of time here. Describe the steps in the preparation of direct and indirect cash flow statement, including how cash flows can be computed using the income statement and the balance sheet data. This is the direct method. I told you, you will have to drill down your accounting records to see how much cash was received through the sales ledger control account, what was the amount received by disposal of trading securities. Each item will have to be identified from your accounting data, and then you will be able to determine the gross cash receipts from these areas and payments for inventory, purchase ledger control account, purchase of trading security for the period, salaries and wages paid, and interest expense, taxes, etc. All these items will have to be ascertained from the accounting records. This is the direct method. Time consuming, and that's why it's costly. It takes more time in drawing up, and that's why it's costly. Indirect method starts from net income, and that is the area that will be given to you to extract the data from the given information and draw up a certain segment of the cash flow. You start from net income. Now let us discuss why a certain item is added and why a certain item is deducted. You starting from net income, let's say your net income is $2 million. Gentlemen, I need your full attention because I'm going to tell you why do we add, why do we deduct, and I'm going to spend 10 to 15 minutes on this part alone. Doesn't matter. Now let's say your 2 million is your net income. Over the period means over the quarter, over the 6 months period, or over the year. If your receivables have fallen, let's say your opening receivables were 10 million and your closing receivables are 8 million. There has been a decrease in receivable. Think. Decrease in receivable could have resulted in what? Inflow. When there is a decrease in receivables, it means they have paid us. Decrease in receivables over the period, it is added. Conversely speaking, if your receivables have increased over the period, it means they didn't pay. They are not paying us effectively means an outflow. This is how you can memorize. If receivables have decreased, means they have paid us, add it up in your net income. If they have increased over the period, if they have decreased, means inflow. If they have the balance increased over the period, it means they haven't paid. They're not paying us, effectively represents an outflow. Okay, next. Likewise, inventories, if they have decreased over the period, if the inventory balance has decreased over the period, where did it go? It didn't vanish in the thin air. You would have sold it. You would have received cash against it. Remember, so when there is a decrease in inventories over the period, it represents an inflow. And if the inventory balance has increased over the period, it means we couldn't sell that much and we have piled up our inventory over the period. This would have resulted in an outflow. So decrease in inventories is an inflow, increase is an outflow. Moving on. Increase in payables. If your accruals, account payables have increased over the period, good. You're being smart in managing cash. You delayed the payment. Delaying the payment to your accounts payable effectively leaves more cash with you. So delaying payments to accounts payable, if account payable balance has increased over the period, you have withheld cash. That is an inflow. And if over the period, if payables balance has decreased, decrease in payables clearly means you have paid off. It's an outflow. So increase in payables, accruals, accounts payable, it's an inflow. Decrease is an outflow, right? Depreciation expense. Depreciation expense is a non-cash expense because when we charge depreciation against our income, we debit depreciation expense, credit accumulated depreciation. We do not credit cash. When we charge depreciation, we do not pay anything to anybody. We simply debit depreciation, credit accumulated depreciation. It's a non-cash charge against an income. Since we are reconciling our net income to the cash provided by operating activities, depreciation is one of the anomalies between your net income and cash flow. It has to be reversed so that we can convert our net income into cash flows. So depreciation, since it's a non-cash expense deducted from net income, in order to reverse its impact, we add it back. Depreciation expense is added. Remember, depreciation expense, not the balance of accumulated depreciation. Accumulated depreciation is a contra account deducted from the cost of the asset on the balance sheet. So depreciation expense for the period, it's a non-cash expense to be added. All right. Amortization of bond discount. When we issue a bond for 80 with the par value of 100, this difference is called bond discount. This bond discount is amortized shoya bit by bit over the life of the bond. This amortization of bond discount effectively is like non-cash expense. It's a charge against your income for which there is no cash being paid. Amortization of bond discount is similar to depreciation, a charge against your income, but it does not result in any cash outflow. It's one of the anomalies between your net income and cash flow from operating activity. It has to be reversed. That's why amortization of bond discount is added. Right? Then, conversely speaking, what about amortization of bond premium? Sometimes if your coupon rate is higher than the market rate, a bond that is with a par of 100 might sell for $115. This difference between the issue price and the par value, this represents premium on bond issue. This premium is also amortized like discount. This is opposite in direction to the discount amortization. Discount amortization is added and premium amortization is deducted. This is a detailed topic we will discuss in your long-term liabilities. We will discuss bond valuation. There we will discuss it in detail, how the premium on bond is amortized, the difference between interest expense and interest paid, and same we will do with the both type of amortization, bond discount and bond premium. So just for now, remember, bond discount amortization is a non-cash charge against the income to be added. It's a non-cash income, in other words, that is added in the part of that has been reduced in your expenses, so it has to be deducted. They move in the opposite direction for the time being. That's what we can, at least for the time being, we can keep it in mind. Amortization bond discount is added, amortization of bond premium is deducted. Okay. Then loss on sale of plant asset. When you sell an asset, let's say an asset had a net book value in your book of $10,000, we sold it for $7,000. This $3,000 loss on disposal, it is charged against your income, right? This charge against your income did not result in any outflow. This loss, 3,000 loss, is a non-cash loss. You did not pay these 3,000, like depreciation which was not paid to anybody. This 3,000 loss on disposal is also a non-cash loss. So this loss on plant asset must be added back, just like depreciation, to reverse the impact of non-cash transaction. So remember, loss on sale of plant asset, like depreciation, like amortization of bond discount, it is added back to the net income to remove the impact of non-cash transactions. Okay. Now, gain on sale of plant asset. Now, this is a very interesting part. Let's say an asset with net book value of $10,000 was sold for $12,000. Clearly, there is a gain for $2,000. This gain on sale of plant asset is deducted. Now, you can ask me, so why? We have received this total $12,000. $10,000 was the net book value. This additional $2,000 is the gain. It's a cash amount which has been received. Why it is being deducted? The point is, if we do not deduct this $2,000 here, and we consider the entire $12,000 as a cash flow from investing activities, it will be double counting. This $12,000, the whole of it would appear in the cash flow from operating activities, from investing activities. This $12,000, the whole of it will be shown cash flow from investing activities. If we did not remove this 2,000 from net income, it will be double counting. This 2,000 gain is included in your net income, right? And at the same time, you are considering full $12,000 as a cash flow from investing activity. It's an investing activity. Kavish, $12,000 cash flow from investing activities. It's an investing inflow. Now, this $2,000 is already in the income, and you are again $12,000, including this $2,000 gain is already the investing activity. In order to remove this double impact of gain, we need to deduct $2,000 gain on disposal. Remember, gain on disposal is deducted, loss is added. And the reason for deducting gain is because the whole full amount that we will receive will be shown in the investing cash inflow. Right now, there is one fine point, and it hasn't luckily been tested in any software or in QBank or in EOCs. Loss on investment in equity method investee. Let's say, we had an asset of $10,000 net book value. We sold it for $12,000, right? Clearly, there is a gain, and this gain is included as a part of your net income, gain on disposal. Now, this gain is already included in $2,000 as a $2,000 in your net income, and at the same time, this $12,000 will be shown as an investing inflow. It is an investing inflow. Now the problem is, this 2,000 is in the net income, and this 12,000 is in the investing inflow. This 2,000 is a common amount which is there in the net income as well as in the investing inflow. So this 2,000 will have to be removed from net income here, and the full 12,000 will be reported as a cash flow from investing activities. Right? That's the reason. We don't want to double count the gain, because 12,000 includes 2,000 gain, and 2,000 gain is already in the income. So we can't count the gain twice. Harsh, I hope it made sense now. So that's right, 2,000 needs to be deducted here, and full amount will be shown there in your investing activities. All right. Now this is very unlikely you might be tested on this, but still let's do it. Let's say I have invested some money in Harsh's company, and let's say my investment is 30%, and I have accounted for this investment as equity-based investing. Let's say if Harsh has incurred a loss, $100,000 loss. Since I own 30% of Harsh Corporation's stock, this $100,000 loss, 30% of loss is mine. This must be borne by me. This loss would be reported as a loss in my net income. Now the question is, this $30,000 loss, which is 30% of $100,000 loss incurred by Harsh company, this $30,000 loss is included as a charge against my net income. Did I pay anything to anyone for this loss? Like depreciation, I didn't pay anything, added back. Like amortization of bond discount, I didn't pay anything, added back. Loss on disposal, I didn't pay anything, added back. Same thing, this 30,000 loss has been charged against my income because of equity-based loss incurred in Harsh organizations, Harsh Incorporated. This 30,000 loss is a non-cash loss. It hasn't been paid. It has to be added back. This loss has to be added back because I didn't pay for this loss. Like depreciation wasn't paid, amortization of bond discount wasn't paid. This loss, a charge against net income, wasn't paid. It's one of the anomalies between your cash flow from operating activities and net income. That's why it has to be added. Likewise, I have invested in Kavish Incorporated. Kavish Incorporated earned $150,000 net income this year. And I have made investment of 40% in his organization, which means if he has earned $150,000 income this year, 40% belongs to me. That is $60,000. This $60,000 is included in my net income. Kavish didn't pay me even a single dime, and I have considered this $60,000 as a part of my income. I did not receive anything from him in cash form. It's a non-cash income. Just like when a non-cash loss on equity-based investee was added back, a gain on equity-based investee must be deducted. So I must deduct 60 here and I must add back 30 here, right? Non-cash loss to be added. This is very unlikely would be tested on this, but since it was there, so I thought to explain it to you. So this is how we draw up our cash flow under the indirect method. We take net income and make these adjustments, and then we end up with the cash provided by operating activities. So this is how we draw up cash flows. Now the next LOS says convert cash flows from indirect to direct method. From indirect method to direct method. This is the indirect method that starts from net income. Certain additions and subtraction is made and you get net cash from operating activities. Now, how do we convert this indirect method into direct method? There are certain points to remember. This is the direct method. Sale revenue effectively has impact of positive, it's an inflow. Sale revenue effectively represents an inflow. Since sale revenue includes the impact of accrual-based accounting, this accrual-based accounting concept needs to be removed. Now, gentlemen, pay special attention what we'll do. Sales or revenue will be taken as a positive if your account receivable have decreased over the period. It means they would have paid you. Decrease in account receivables will be added. If there has been an increase in account receivables, it will be deducted. So it means we can calculate cash collections from customers. From moving from indirect to direct method, take sales from the income statement. If there has been an increase in account receivable, it means they didn't pay, deduct. Whatever the increase over the period of receivable, deduct. If there has been a decrease, add. So remember, we take sale as a positive. If account receivable balance has decreased, it's an inflow. If account receivable balance has increased over the period, they didn't pay, it's an outflow. We'll do it in questions short. Now this part, unearned revenue. Unearned revenue is like your current liability, right? How do we treat this unearned revenue within the customer cash collected from customers? If your unearned revenue, which is your current liability, if it increases over the period, if current liability has increased over the period, it means you have received cash. Just like when accounts payable increase, it's an inflow. So when your unearned revenue increases over the period, it means you have received cash not yet earned. It's an addition. If your unearned revenue balance has decreased over the period like a current liability, it means it's an outflow. Same approach you will apply. Next, cash paid to suppliers. We start with COGS. It has opposite dynamics of your revenue. If revenue is considered as positive, COGS will be taken as negative, right? If sale is considered as a positive, your COGS will be taken as a negative. You start with the negative COGS. Now, carefully. If your account payable balance has decreased over the period, it means you have paid them. Whatever the difference, deduct this. If your account payable balance has increased over the period, it means you withheld their payments. It's an inflow. Just little idea. Keep this in mind. Account payable balance has decreased, you would have paid, deduct. If accounts payable balance has increased over the period, you did not pay. When you withhold the payment, effectively it's a plus sign, remember. So COGS will start with negative. If there has been a change in accounts payable, plus minus, I've just explained. Go with the inventory. What you do with inventory? Again, if your inventory balance has increased over the period, it means it was not released in cash form, it's an outflow. If an inventory balance over the period has decreased, it's an inflow. Now we got the idea. COGS is negative. Decrease in inventory, cash inflow. Increase in inventory, cash outflow. Increase in accounts payable, good. You withheld their payments, inflow. Decrease in accounts payable, you have paid them, outflow. This is how we can calculate cash paid to suppliers. This is how we convert our indirect cash flow to direct. Then, how much cash did we pay in taxes? Tax expense on the income statement, take it as a negative. COGS is an expense, negative. Tax is an expense, negative. Now, if over the period income tax payable increased, it means you withheld the payment for one reason or the other, it's an inflow, added. If the income tax payable over the period has decreased, you would have paid, outflow. Increased in deferred tax liability. Increase in deferred tax liability means you withheld the payment. It's effectively an inflow. If there has been a decrease in deferred tax liability reduction means it is being debited and cash will go out negative. This is a simple idea which will help you solve many questions like these. Cash interest. Interest expense taken from the income statement, negative. If interest payable has increased over the period, it means you withheld the payment, add. If interest payable has decreased over the period, you have paid, deduct. Likewise, wages. You take this wages number from the income statement, it's a negative number. It's an expense. If wages payable has decreased over the period, you have settled the wages, it means it's an outflow. If the wages payable balance has increased, you have withheld the payments, it's an inflow. That's the simple logic. That's the simple logic. We'll apply this in the questions as well. So those who are my CMA students, they have just joined us for drilling deeper into the cash flow statements. Please, this is not your domain. You won't be required to convert the direct, indirect method into direct. Your question on cash flows will be quite straightforward. So no need to drill down or no need to mug up your mind with the things which are irrelevant. Now, next reading is analyze and interpret both reported and common size cash flow statements. Cash flow statement is very helpful. Income statement is accrual based. Balance sheet shows you the equity balances, different types of asset balances and liabilities. We still need to see what was the movement of cash over the period in three specific categories: operating, investing and financing. So cash flows help us in evaluation of the company, how well they have managed funds, where did the money come from, evaluation of the firm's sources of different types of sources, operating, financing and investing, and how was it used. This was the first evaluation of operating cash flows, investing and financing. Ideally, what as an analyst I would be interested in, that my operating cash flows over the long term, if my business is successful, my operating cash flows must be sufficient enough to cover my capital expenditures, sufficient enough to provide return to the debt holders in the form of interest, sufficient enough to provide the dividends to the equity holders. So my cash flow from operating activities should be sufficient enough for these outflows: capital expenditures for business expansion, interest for the bondholders, for the bankers from whom we have taken long-term loan, and dividends for the equity holders. That's the main objective. Now let us analyze each these one by one. Operating cash flows, as we have discussed, they are earning related. They come from the income statement, cash received from customers, paid for different supplies, expenses, etc. So this is one of the most, I would say this is the most important cash flow. Operating cash flows are the most important cash flows. They provide us an idea that whether the business is going to sustain in the long term, because if the business is generating negative operating cash flows, how will it meet its cash needs in the future? Business will have to generate some cash in order to sustain. So a stable relationship between your operating cash flows and income is an indication of quality earnings. Like our income is $10 million and our cash generated from operation cannot be always 10, could be more or less. Let's say if it's 7 million, so it's like our operating cash flows are on average 70% of your net income, meaning thereby the difference caused between your operating cash flow income is because of accrual accounting, certain non-cash transactions like depreciation, amortization of different intangibles, etc. So there has to be a stable relationship between operating cash flows and net income, indicating that the company has quality earnings. Investing cash flows, as the name suggests, is an indication of growth. If you invest in long-lived assets, these are the assets that will generate your operating cash flows in the future. Purchasing machinery, property, plant and equipment, vehicles, computer equipments, these are the assets that will generate cash flows in the future for you. So these are the assets. If company has made sizable investment in investment, so these assets will generate operating cash flows in the future. So your operating cash flows primarily come from your long-lived assets that generate cash for the business. Then financing cash flows. They come from issuing debt and equity securities. You might receive cash now, they will bring cash for you, but in the future you have to repay if it's a redeemable preferred stock or bonds that need to be redeemed in 5 or 10 years. You may have to sometime acquire your own stock from the market called the treasury stock, and we have to pay. So financing cash flows may come in sizable quantity now, but it will result in repayments in the form of dividends, interest, and sometimes you have to retire the debts as well. So next, analyze and interpret both reported and common size cash flow statements. Now, your cash flow statements, like we discussed, are common size income statement, common size balance sheet. Income statement could be vertical, horizontal, where we take sale as our base and every number in the income statement is expressed as a percentage of sale. On balance sheet, we take total assets as our base and every number is expressed as a percentage of total assets. Or it could be horizontal as well, where we take a base year, 2020 is a base year, and all the later years are expressed as a percentage of base year numbers. We discuss in detail. Cash flows are reported differently. We have two alternatives for presenting common size cash flows. Either we express it as a percentage of revenue, every number of cash flows, like in this case, it is expressed as a percentage of revenue. Net income is a percentage of revenue. Every item is expressed as a percentage of revenue. This is one of the alternative ways of presenting a common size cash flow statement. Alternatively, we can use inflow-outflow approach. Every inflow could be expressed as a percentage of total cash inflows, and every outflow can be expressed as a percentage of total cash outflows over the period. So these are the two alternatives which we can use to convert our cash flow statement in common size. This is an example given. Every number you see here is expressed as a percentage of revenue. Last LOS, calculate and interpret free cash flow to the firm, free cash flow to equity, and some performance and coverage cash flow ratios as well. First, what is free cash flow? Free cash flow is a measure of cash that is available for discretionary purposes for the firm. There are two types of free cash flows. One is called free cash flow to the firm and one is free cash flow to equity. Let us discuss these using the formula and explain what they are. First, free cash flow to the firm can be calculated. What is free cash flow to the firm? The cash available for discretionary purposes we can utilize in the firm. It can be calculated in two ways. First, free cash to the firm can be calculated taking your net income from the income statement. NCC means non-cash charges. What are the non-cash charges? Depreciation, amortization. So net income To this add your non-cash charges, add or less working capital investment, and to this add interest but after tax interest. So take your net income, non-cash charges, adjustment for working capital, after tax interest, and from this FC represents your fixed capital investment or net capital expenditure. So after making these adjustments, what you get is called FCFF, free cash flow to the firm. This is the cash available to the firm for discretionary spending. There are two ways to calculate it. One is given above. Other is if you just add these three together, net income, non-cash charges, and working capital adjustments. They are all added, gives you cash flow from operations. They give you cash flow from operations. And rest of it is as it is, after tax interest and fixed capital investment. So technically they are the same. In this case, we have just taken the cash flow from operations. In the other one, we have given the split numbers. This will give you the cash flow, free cash flow to the firm. Next is free cash flow to equity. What is free cash flow to equity? Free cash flow to equity is basically after tax cash flows adjusted for fixed capital investment and borrowing. This is the cash flow that would be available for distribution to the common stockholders. Free cash flow to equity is the cash flow that would be available for distribution to the common shareholders. This is calculated by taking CFO cash flow from operations, fixed capital investment, and net borrowings. Net borrowing means any debt issued is an inflow. Any debt repaid or redeemed, it's an outflow. So net debt borrowings. So this net result will give you the cash that is available for distribution to the common shareholders. This was for the whole firm. That's why it's called cash flow, free cash flow to the firm. And this is the free cash flow to the equity, means the cash flow that would be available for distribution to the common stockholders. Now we have certain ratios. Let us quickly go through these. Ratios related to cash flows are divided into two main categories: performance ratios and coverage ratios. Let us discuss these one by one. Performance ratios will primarily relate to your activities and profitability. First is the cash flow to revenue. As I said, cash flow from operation is the most important cash flow. Why? Because this is the cash you rely on. This is the cash that drives the business. You cannot meet your cash needs by selling your long-lived assets. You cannot meet your needs by selling bonds and shares for long. It's the operating cash flows that has to be sustainable for the business to remain sustainable. Cash flow from operations are the most important cash flows. So the first one is cash flow to revenue. If you divide cash flow from operations to net revenue, this ratio tells you if your total revenue is, let's say, 10 million, how much of cash has been generated out of the revenue. Let's say 7 million, indicating 70%. It means if revenue is 10 million, we have generated 70% of cash from this revenue. Cash flow is what fraction of sales? The higher, the better. If this ratio is higher, it means we are able to convert more of the revenues into operating cash flows. Right? Next, cash return on assets. Cash flow from operations upon average total asset. It is something called ROTA, return on total assets, similar to ROTA, return on total assets. But instead of net income here, we have cash flow from operating activities. So it is similar to profitability ratio of return on total assets. We have used CFO instead of net income. So it is more or less like how much cash has been generated from operations rather than taking net income. CFO is what fraction of average total assets, similar to profitability, but we have used cash flows rather than net income. Next, cash return on equity. Rather than using your return on equity, if you replace CFO with net income adjusted for the preferred stock, this is called return on equity, common equity. Since we are interested in our cash rather than accrual based income, similar to CFO is what fraction of your total equity. It's a measure of company's performance. Cash to income, cash flow to income. This ratio is greatly affected by credit sales, because in the denominator, your operating income is influenced by sales, but we may not have collected all the sales, so your cash could be different and your revenue could be very high, but since you have quite an extended period given to your customers for collection, so there could be a sizable difference between your operating cash flows and your operating income. So ratio is greatly affected by credit sales or non-cash charges. Then we have cash flow per share. This ratio is similar to EPS. In EPS, what we do, we take net income minus preferred dividend upon weighted average number of shares. But here, instead of net income, we have used cash flow from operation. So similar to EPS, but we use CFO instead of accrual-based income to get a cash impact of the performance. Finally, we have our coverage ratios. Debt coverage, CF upon total debt. This ratio provides us the sufficiency of CFOs for repayment of total debt. Mind the word total debt. Cash flow from operation is what fraction of the total debts. How comfortably can we discharge the total debt from our operating cash flows? Interest coverage ratio. Cash flow from operations adding back interest and taxes paid gives us interest coverage ratio. It is sufficiency of cash flow from operations for interest payment. How comfortably can we pay interest? Like if addition of all these gives us $10,000, for example, and interest paid is just $2,000, it means our cash flow together with interest and taxes is 5 times of the interest paid. So we have the comfort of 5 times of our interest as our cash flow from operations plus interest and taxes. Interest coverage, just like in earning before interest and tax upon interest, this is called your interest coverage or times interest earned. So we have something similar measure. Here we use EBIT, earning before interest and tax, and this is your cash flow from operations before interest and tax. So the dynamics are all the same. We have replaced our net income with CFO, right? Reinvestment, cash flow upon cash paid for long-term assets. Sufficiency of our cash flow for asset replacement. How much cash have we generated from operation for asset replacement? Debt repayment. How much cash have we generated from operations to discharge our long-term debt? Here we had the total debt. Here we are talking about the long-term debt. Dividends payment. What is the size of our cash flow from operation and how many times can we pay the dividend out of it? So sufficiency of your CFOs for the dividend payment. And finally, investment and financing cash flow. CFO is what percentage of your cash flow from investing and financing. Ideally, your cash flow from operation should be more than this, because this is the cash flow that we rely on, and that's what drives the business forward. And that completes your reading totally.